Hi, I'm Andy Kaufman, President of the Institute for Leadership Excellence Development Incorporated. Thank you for joining me for this video episode of the People and Projects podcast. Well, in this episode, we're going to talk about the Project Management Office, the PMO. And this is an interesting topic because as I intersect with a lot of different companies, I find people that, certainly love their PMO and they're like, I hate our PMO. I run into people that can't spell PMO, okay? So this is a subject that's of a lot of interest with organizations who are trying to get more mature and more reliable with how we deliver. Well, to talk about PMOs, I'm joined today by Peter Taylor and Bill Dow and Hussain Bandukwala. These are three guys who focus on helping organizations learn how to lead and deliver, and great expertise on how to do that with PMOs. We're going to talk about subjects such as, what is the state of PMOs today? What are they seeing? Not in theory, but in actuality. What are they seeing? We're going to talk about how do you start one up? How do you get executive support and sell your PMO? How do you keep it relevant? And we'll talk about, as Agile continues to adopt even beyond software development, how does Agile and the PMO integrate? And then we'll have the guys take their swing at, what do we think this looks like 5 years from now or 10 years from now? What does the future look like for PMOs? Well, I know I enjoyed the discussion when it happened, and I look forward to sharing it with you today in this episode. So let's get to that discussion with Peter and Bill and Hussain on the Project Management Office. I'm excited to be joined today by some of my favorite voices when it comes to the topic of the Project Management Office. So let's have each of you introduce yourself, starting with Peter.
Yeah, hi there. My name is Peter Taylor. I'm probably more famously known as the Lazy Project Manager. And I've been in project management way too many years, but I'm a speaker, author, and currently I'm a consultant working in a major transformation program in the UK.
Okay, Bill.
Excellent. Bill Dow, calling in from the Seattle, Washington area. So I'm a 4-time author. I've presented across multiple conferences. And really, I'm here to give PMO and project management expertise to folks.
That's great. And Hussain.
Hi, everyone. This is Hussain Bandukwala from Toronto, Ontario. And I help small to mid-sized businesses help set up their PMOs, so companies that are within 150 to 500 employees range, really help folks, who've either been setting up the PMO for the first time, and especially folks who are sort of, promoted from within and may not even have prior project management experience or extensive project management experience.
All right.
To really help them set up their roadmap and get buy-in and really be a sounding board for them. Sounds good.
Well, I am so glad to have you guys here. Let's start in with the state of the PMO today, okay? I'm interested in seeing, from your experience with the clients you guys work with, what seems to be working and not working. So, Peter, let's start with you. How would you summarize what you're seeing with PMOs in the companies you're interacting with?
Yeah, great question to start with, because I'm seeing an explosion of PMO everywhere. Now, we kind of have to start with what on earth does PMO stand for? Is it Project Management Office, Portfolio Management Office, Program Management Office? The joke is, of course, projects mostly over budget. That's the good one. But there's that confusion to start with. But it seems to be PMO is the answer for everything. So I'm seeing a mass. When I wrote the book a long time ago, I struggled to find 100 PMO jobs out there around the world. I could probably find 100 in London right now with PMO in their title. That's the good thing. But I think the bad thing is that organizations don't truly understand what they're necessarily getting with a PMO, what they need from a PMO. And so I think the challenge is finding the right type of PMO for an organization, understanding what the business truly needs. And the other thing I think I've seen, the challenge, if you like, is around the kind of rigidity of PMOs, the fact that they are created and then they become an administrative overhead. So I'm seeing some really good stuff. I'm utterly delighted that there are so many PMO roles out there, from analysts all the way up to head of PMO or whatever. We're even seeing some chief projects officers, which is wonderful. But interest is also bringing about significant growth in challenges to PMOs as well. That's kind of what I'm seeing out there.
Yeah. That's great. Bill, how about you?
Yeah, hit and miss, really. They start, they fail, right? They start up again, they fail again, right? I call it the PMO cycle in both the books I wrote. And I really see this as like a 3-year period. They start up, something's exciting, and then something happens and they fail again. When I think about what's working, I think really around prescriptive and kind of that directive PMOs, a lot of project managers want to know what status reports to use, what issue and risk logs to use, and they really like that kind of that directive process. Hey, give me this status report, give me this log, give me this type of thing. And so I like that part of it. What I'm struggling with and what I've seen fail quite often are the supportive PMOs, just setting up to do training. Often, people will go through that training and then they forget when they go back to the real job, and so that's what I'm seeing. Really in the bucket right now of what's happening from a PMO perspective.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Hussain, what are you seeing?
Yeah. So specifically from the small to mid-sized space, what I'm really seeing is that PMOs, or rather not having one, is really seen as a perceived problem versus a realized problem. And I think, when companies or organizations are not getting their initiatives done, they're not, or not getting done on time or on budget, and not having sort of the predictability and consistency of how initiatives are happening, they typically blame it on other things versus the absence of earnings, etc. So, and that's something that PMOs can really help them with. But what they do is they try to do a few things that are without, other than setting up a PMO, and that doesn't work. And then when stuff starts hitting the fan, then they realize, okay, we really need a PMO. And sometimes they are able to go ahead and get it up and going pretty quickly. But sometimes they might need outside help, which they don't really reach out for till they actually finally realize, okay, let's try to get something out. So it's really the whole process of finally realizing the problem and doing something about it the right way. I think that cycle is long, and people who try to get ahead of that, they're able to see the results pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm thinking of 2 organizations that I work with that when I think of like places with PMOs that are really doing a good job, one of them is a financial services company, and from a what value do they bring? They probably the best I've seen where really good standards, practical, finely tuned to the organization. I mean, very relevant from that regard, and certainly on the training side. But the other one I'm thinking of, this director of the PMO is a seat at the table. The financial services one isn't like that. And I'm telling you,
that's critical.
Guy, he's almost more like a chief technology officer as the director of the PMO. And I'm sure you guys have seen this as well, kind of this spectrum. Both of them are adding value to their company, but in significantly different ways. So let's kind of move the discussion here to, let's say someone listening, they don't have a PMO currently, but because of our amazing persuasive powers here today, man, we really need to build one of these. So Bill, let's start with you, because I know you and Peter both have written a lot about this.
Yeah.
But let's start with you. What are some of the most important steps that you'd recommend for someone standing up a new PMO today?
Yeah, so I basically have documented this twice. I said there's really 12 key steps in building a PMO. Okay, now 12 is a lot, so I'm going to break it down. The first thing you have to get is executive support. You need executives to support this, or this is never going to last. And then Peter mentioned it, but what's the P in your PMO? Is it portfolio? Is it program? Is it project? Right? Is it a combination of the two? You need a model. You need to know if you're directive, if you're supportive, if you're enterprise. You got to pick that. You got to get resources. You have to have some basic tools, and even the tools could be risk and issue logs, processes, some processes that are associated with that tools, and then some basic reporting. So those would be like the 6 things that you have to kind of secure while establishing a PMO.
Yeah, that's good. That's a nice summary. For a guy who writes a lot, that's that down and just like that was very impressive.
Thanks.
So, Hussain, you're working with a lot of organizations, like you said. I mean, they got nothing, and you're trying to help them. So, what are a couple things you try to do to help them get started?
The first thing that I really ask them is why do they really need a PMO? And that is one question that a lot of organizations have a trouble answering. Some of them may just even need, good project managers at that specific point in time, and that would just do the trick for them. But just making sure that they understand why the PMO is needed and getting that perspective, not from one, two, but a multitude of stakeholders, including, let's say executive sponsors for the PMO, including potential partners, departmental partners, and as well as, if organizations those organizations already have any program project managers or coordinators, getting their take in it as well. I think just getting that why answered is a big piece, and even if it takes some time to set that up and get the right answers and get that consensus, I think that's well worth it. So I really ask the organizations to take that time and really become very crystal clear on what is the true reason that they need the PMO.
Yeah, sounds like a good place to start. Peter, anything else come to mind?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, I'm a really simple guy, as you know, and I try and break things down as simply as possible. So, my take on this is that if you think about projects, it's just about doing it the right way. That's all it is. It's doing it the right way. And then I think, the program is doing the right projects in the right order, and the portfolio is doing the right things for the company. So you can extrapolate that to the PMO, and I think it's doing it with the right people. So, one, get some great advice. Two, get a great leader and get your very best people inside the PMO, because they will make a difference. And if I can reflect back on what you previously said, there was, the PMO, yeah, absolutely. You need to understand what it's aiming to do here, because a PMO can be the kind of custodian of strategy. It can be the advisors of strategy, and it could be the creators of strategy. And you alluded to the very highest level, almost a C-level executive heading up a PMO. At the if you like, the custodians, they're just looking after the portfolio. At the advisory, they're kind of giving back and saying, hey, you can start this new project, but there's an impact, or we need more resources, or you're going to have to slow this down. And the greatest position for a PMO is when they have a seat at the table. They are working on the creation of that strategy and that transformation of that strategy into projects. Yeah, man,
that's a great comment. That director of the PMO that I was talking about, that's kind of almost like a CTO. I had him present to an MBA class that I teach at. He was like a guest presenter, and one of the things that he said was really interesting to me. He goes, I'm to the point now where I believe the greatest value I can bring to the organization is my Rolodex, so to speak. Because I don't normally think of that. I think normally I hear people say, like, it's my deep technical background, or it's my knowledge of the project management processes. But he is so tied in at that level. He's like, right, when Apple comes in, when Google comes into their organization, he's in those meetings, and he's to the point where that's the value he brings. So different, I think, than a lot of people's mental model about what you're supposed to be at that level, right? Any thoughts on that, guy?
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, having someone at that higher level like that, it makes a world of difference. That's why I keep stressing executive support. You've got to have someone at the seat at the table.
Yeah,
it's so critical.
And Peter, I've certainly seen that in your writing and speaking as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It begins. One of the sad case studies I had in my last book on PMOs was where the project management community created a PMO themselves from the bottom up. They put hours in, etc., and they were axed. In fact, the guy who set it up was basically moved on because it didn't have executive support, and yet they were doing something really good for the business. It really was quite tragic.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's one thing to start a PMO, I guess. I mean, starting something can be challenging, but perhaps it's even more difficult to keep this thing going. So whether a PMO is relatively new or maybe it's been around for years, what are some of the most important lessons that you've learned about keeping a PMO relevant and valuable? Peter, let's start with you.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to my balanced PMO model, which is the 5 Ps. For a PMO to be successful, it's about people. It's about process, it's about performance, it's about promotion, it's about your underlying project management systems. The people and process, you've got to get that balance right. If it's all about processing, you are the project police, which is never a good thing. It's all it's all about the people. It's not having the structure, etc. But the bit I think that is often missed is the promotion. It is the fact that you're not necessarily selling the PMO, but you are articulating or sharing the knowledge of what the PMO is achieving and how it's bringing value to the organization. I think one of the risks to a PMO is that suddenly you end up with a group that can be quite expensive and nobody's quite sure what they're actually doing necessarily. And if they spend too much time just chasing reports and all the rest of it, they become the project police. Yeah, my tips are always for people. One is do not be the project police. It's an unpleasant experience and you won't last. Secondly, be the right sort of firefighter. Those guys, they go out there, they spend most of their time trying to prevent fires rather than rushing into buildings and saving small kittens. So the PMO should be very much around that as well. So get the balance right: people, process, performance, promotion, and project systems.
Yeah, that's good. Hussain, what do you think about keeping, once you start, when you're working with your clients, anything in particular you try to coach them to do to keep it relevant?
Yes, I mean, I think both Bill and Peter sort of hit upon the point that, the PMOs really need to be the facilitators, the sort of the Switzerlands of the world, and have that neutral vantage point. And in order for you to do that, in order to either get the seat or maintain that seat at the executive table, you need to continuously keep a pulse on the needs of the organization and keep on evolving your PMO based on their needs. So, that means not only just doing the status quo that you're now after the setup has been done, but keep on asking, formally and informally, to understand what are the needs of the organization and how they can go about making those changes happen. So that's number one. The other thing, and I think it's a bit rudimentary, but I think it's very important, is very plain and simple marketing effort. I think once it gets out in place, I think PMOs don't do a good enough job proclaiming what they're doing, and just a bit of marketing around what they're doing, how they're improving the organization, it goes a long way, right? So I feel, let's say if a major program was completed and the PMO had a big hand in it, that print out posters, put it next to the elevators, let people know that the PMO is out there helping the organization and doing the job that it was supposed to do. So once that happens, organization or departments or areas within an organization that once weren't included as part of the influential area of the PMO would say, you know what, this might be interesting. Let me go approach these guys and see how they can help me. And that way they keep on going and expanding their footprint within the organization and continuing to add additional value to the workplace.
Yeah, okay. That sounds good. Bill, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think they're great points. I think just to follow up on what Hussain was saying, executive reporting and dashboards critical, right? And we got to get what reports do the executives want? What dashboards do they want? Peter mentioned that as well. And I think really getting in front of the executives and making sure that everyone is getting the reports and the dashboards to see exactly how the PMO is tracking is critical. I also think about governance too, and the cadence and how is the organization being ran? Is the PMO a part of that, right? Is the PMO driving monthly steercos and driving the governance and driving the portfolio management? I think these things are all key in keeping the PMO relevant and continue to keep it on track and part of a major part of the organization.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to interview on the podcast a while back Ed Schein from MIT, and he's the guy who coined the term corporate culture. And he just talked about how, if you try to fight against the culture, you're going nowhere, right? You have to somehow be part of that culture and hopefully change it over time. But he goes, the single best way to change culture is to deliver, be the equivalent of, right? That's how you change it, is when we actually add the value. And so, Peter, there was a theme across all the comments here about promotion. I mean, we said it in different sorts of ways, but we have to add value. We have to, and I think anyone listening to us is like, yeah, okay, I need to market this thing, or I need executive support, but how do I do it? So we have the risk of oversimplifying everything, but just what would you do if a PMO director comes up to you and goes, Peter, I feel like I just don't have the executive support I need here, or I feel like I don't get the respect that the executives really could give. So what are a couple things you might coach that person to do? And I'll ask you.
Yeah. Okay. So I joke when I run workshops is, phone up your CEO and see how quickly they recognize who you are. Hopefully they do. Well, there's a great touch point about, how well you're promoting, how well you're understood. I think, you have to be very proactive in a lot of this stuff. You have to have the information to hand. You have to track the improvements that the PMO is delivering. The metrics are really important. All those statistics and reports are useful, but also I think you need to get yourself invited to meetings where you can talk about the PMO and represent what the PMO is doing. And the biggest value add argument I still think is that they are the protectors of the investment in strategic change that you're undertaking inside an organization. And in my most recent book, How to Get Fired at the C-Level, I challenged organizations that the ones that don't take that seriously, connecting strategy to actually project delivery, are the ones that do actually get fired for mismanaging change. So the PMO is such a great help in that area. And that's the kind of conversation I would have at that level.
Yeah, that's good. Bill, somebody comes up, Bill, I'm not getting the support I need.
Yeah. What I do is I work with the current support person I have. So I've stressed and the PMOs I've ran, I've always had that one single person. And my best advice is to work with that one person to get one or two of his peers, because that PMO cycle, they come and go in that 3 to 5 year range, right? And so you're always wanting that executive who is supporting you today. You want them to be going to their peers and saying, hey, how do we jointly, support this PMO? Because when that person leaves, you're stuck unless you have someone else. So it's that, that peer-to-peer relationship. And really at that level, those peers like really talking to one another and working very closely together. So it's an easier sell than someone who's not at that level trying to get a second one on their own.
Yeah. That's good. Hussain, any additional comments there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would say it's just an extension of what Peter and Bill just mentioned here. But typically, when something like that happens, I actually refer to John C. Maxwell's advice, which is if you want people to believe in what you want them to do, they first have to believe in you. And so, you have to make sure that through your one-on-one relationships, you have shown the credibility that you can deliver and that you're someone who can be trusted. That's number one. Number two is, the earlier comment I mentioned about getting feedback on why you need a PMO. When you actually go about asking the stakeholders for that, you can, through those interviews, through those, meetings with them, you can really figure out, who are going to be the ones who are extremely excited about having the PMO there, who are sort of on the fence, and who are going to be the naysayers. And depending on that, you can basically focus on the folks who are really, really excited about it, make them your evangelists, and make them, sort of spread the good word for you. And that will eventually, trickle down into the naysayers as well. So, these are a couple of things that I really, focus on in terms of coaching and make sure that people are following these two strategies. They're simple, but they need time, and you just need to be consistent about it.
Yeah, you guys did a nice job on that question, because it's this sort of stuff that breaks a PMO down, right? If we don't have those relationships. And this guy who I've been kind of referring to, it's a healthcare organization, and he told me, he goes, when I hear that this certain meeting's going to happen, he goes, I find a way to get into that meeting. And so I think there's an interesting assertiveness here that's part of our leadership. And so he would say he hears, so he gets to know the executive assistant really well. And so when he finds out that meeting's going to happen, Apple's coming in, he'd be like, I'm going to make sure I'm in that meeting. And ultimately, I guess it comes down to, he tracks the metrics, like you guys mentioned. He has the metrics. He can tell you at any time, of course, what the portfolio looks like, but also what the numbers are. He just has the answers to any question it seems like they bring up. So it's actually really inspiring to see. But I think he would say, maybe it should be a God-given right that we get the executive support, but that's not the case, right? Uh-huh. He had to go earn it and build the relationships, and that was a big theme you guys talked about. I just got a copy of the Agile Practice Guide from PMI, and there is a section on Agile and the Project Management Office. And I'm interested in your perspectives on how the continued adoption of Agile is impacting PMOs and the organizations that you work with. So Hussain, let's start with you. How does Agile impact PMOs, and what should PMO leaders be doing or thinking about to support Agile adoption?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andy. Before I start answering that, I do want to mention that in my opinion, PMOs should be methodology agnostic. So whether it's agile or traditional, whatever it is, it depends on the needs of the organization. But having said that, the fact that more and more PMOs need to get their attention towards agile is a great thing, because it sheds off certain connotations that are attached with PMOs about being a policing organization or being an organization that slows things down. So the fact that now we have quote unquote agile PMOs and people want it, that shows that the tag of slowing things down, etc., that's going away. So that's a fantastic thing. So when working with PMO leaders around this, I just want to make sure, and what I tell them is that understand that if somebody in your organization wants an agile PMO, make sure that they actually really do need it and the organization can support it. So if the PMO's influence could be either horizontal or vertical. So what I mean by that is horizontal across, let's say, a certain program or a certain portfolio, or it could be vertical within a certain department within the organization. If it's horizontal, implementing an agile PMO, you might want to make sure that all the areas that that program or portfolio touches have the capacity to become agile and deliver the entire value chain in an agile fashion. But if it's vertical, it's much more easier to implement. So just when someone comes up to me and asks me, hey, how do I set up an agile PMO, that's the first thing that I ask them. Just make sure that the entire organization, the entire value chain is able to deliver on the agile needs, and not just because somebody wants a new shiny tool.
I went to a conference and I heard you're supposed to go agile, right? You don't want that, yeah. So Bill, I don't know, from your perspective, what do PMOs need to be thinking about when it comes to agile?
Yeah, I love the agile question because it keeps coming up over and over and over again. So much so, I actually put a new chapter in my book called the Agile PMO. And what I did is we wrote a framework, and we said, right, create a PMO service catalog, right? Manage the financials. And we really broke down exactly how an Agile PMO should run. And really, it's so critical. It's so hot. People butcher that term Agile all the time. And so we thought, let's just get a blueprint out there. Let's just put it in there and help people actually build an Agile PMO going forward. So I think it's just critical and something you just cannot ignore anymore. You have to get it set up.
Yeah, beyond just the shiny object or the new thing.
Yeah. It's part of the starting to become DNA, right? Just because they do butcher that term too, though.
Exactly. Yeah. Peter, what's your experience on this?
Yeah, and part of the frustration is kind of what being touched on. It's it's either the one world or the other. You're either an agile or you're a philistine or whatever. And the reality is, I've been working for years in a very iterative, semi-agile manner, if you like, and I think the PMO should adopt that. Whether you brand it an agile PMO or not, it should be agile in its sense, and it should offer the right methodology for the right project. I typically have worked in major software organizations, and it's just there. It's part of the organization's living being. And I can't really say much more than that. It's embrace it, take it. There's great advantages to it, and get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, it's great feedback, guys. My director that I've been kind of highlighting as we go through this, just because I feel like he's the model in my mind of how it's being done. If you go up to him and say, hey, how's your Agile strategy working? He would say, our Agile projects are 26% faster to market. I mean, he'd have the metrics there. And consistent with what you guys said, he would also, I think if he was here, he'd say, I'm part evangelist when it comes to what Agile actually is, just because like you guys have talked about how, well, is it one or the other, right? Like Peter said, or is it just the newest thing, like Bill and Hussain said? So what does it actually mean? What's the rigor? What's the difference it's making? So it is interesting how, back to the promotion comments, that it applies to the Agile thing here as well. And I love how you guys stated the right methodology for the right project, right? What's the best way to do this instead of thinking one or the other? So let's put our futuristic glasses on here, guys. I actually hate questions like this, but no one will remember 10 years from now what we say, so that's okay. So if we could fast forward 5 to 10 years, okay? So not just next year, how would you expect PMOs to be looking or acting differently? Peter, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, two thoughts really. One, I think, is kind of what I touched on earlier on, the elevation of the PMO's engagement in organizations to the C-level. Chief Projects Officer, Chief Change Officer, I'm available, definitely. But, that really should be the future, I think. I think that's one, definitely. The PMO the PMOs that survive will mature and it will operate at that level, I hope. The second thing is, I think, and I keep going back to this, one of the biggest challenges, I started in project management years ago, and I'm part of the accidental project manager generation. The big challenge I see right now, which PMOs can definitely help, and PMOs I think will eventually absorb some ownership of, is we are in the age of accidental project sponsors. These guys are good, but they haven't got a project management background, and that will change. And I'm just going to reflect that, I did some research for a book on sponsorship, and the three numbers I'd always tell people are 85, 83, 100. And this tells you everything you need to know about project sponsorship right now. I asked a large number of companies. 85% said, yes, they have project sponsors in place and they were leading change. That's a good number. It can improve. Then I asked the second question, what are you doing to support your project sponsors? And 83% of them said, absolutely nothing. We expect them to magically do it. Last question, here's a killer. 100%, it was 99.5%, but I'm rounding it up. 100% said it was really important to have a good project sponsor for project success. Now, I would love in 5 to 10 years that is no longer a problem. The PMOs help solve that problem. The PMO has someone on the board, and life will be fantastic. And I think it's a very exciting future.
Yeah, I like that. I like that vision there. Okay, that sounds good. I don't know, Bill, what do you think?
Well, they're not going away, right? And if they do go away, they come back, right? So they go away, they come back, they go away, they come back. But, where I'm thinking is that we still need to focus and mature the people in the roles. So let's take program management, for example. That's still a very immature role across the organization. PMI's done a little bit with it. They're trying to do a little bit more with it. But I'm starting to see that we really need to mature the people within portfolio management, program management, and project management. And then, of course, Agile, right? You're going to see way more Agile PMOs out there. And across not just IT, we're starting to see Agile being tried in different industries, such as construction. They're starting to work there. Obviously, it started with IT, but you're going to start seeing in the 5 to 10 year range more Agile in the various other industries as well.
Yeah, I agree. Hussain, what do you think? Let's put your futuristic glasses on. What do you think?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts in mind. So, much the way it becomes very evident that you need an IT department or a finance department or a marketing department. I think the whole cycle of, PMOs being from a perceived problem to a realized problem, reducing that cycle to a very, very short span of time. That's something that I hope we can come to a point in achieving that. So that's point number one. Another point is, the fact that PMOs are naturally provided, a seat of neutrality. Right now, you see that, PMOs are typically, reporting to, the CTO, the CIO, and there's not much neutrality within, IT versus non-IT projects or IT versus non-IT stakeholders. And, breaking away from that and something what Peter alluded to, he was referring it, to at a much higher level, having its own C-level seat. But even just a neutral seat at the table is something that would be fantastic for this organization.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is it's so hard to predict. But one thing I think we can all say is if we're not adding value, regardless of the role, we won't be there, right? And so I know in the Agile Practice Guide, a core principle of Agile is servant leadership. And I think that mindset within the project management office, whether it's called that, which I would guess it would be in the future, but regardless, it is, if we're not helping the delivery, it doesn't matter. Right. That it has to do that in order to survive. So well, I've enjoyed our conversation, guys. As we wrap it up, I'd love for each of you to let our listeners know where they can learn more about you. Bill?
My whole world sits at buildalpmp.com. So webinars, my books, my mentoring page, my store, absolutely everything's at buildalpmp.com.
And your John McEnroe tchotchkes behind you.
That's right. And tennis is my life. So.
Okay. And Peter, how about you?
It's easy enough. It's www.thelazyprojectmanager.com. You can go find me there. Where else? But I also do a podcast as well. It's a Lazy Project Manager podcast on iTunes, etc. And I am on LinkedIn. So please, any listener want to connect to me, talk more about PMOs, get out in there and connect to me on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. It's a great podcast. And Hussain, how about you?
Yes, I'm the founder and chief PMO coach at Parwaz Consulting, and you can find me at www.parwazcc.com. So that's PARWAAZCC.com, and there you can learn more about myself. Get my blogs there. Figure out a way to get in touch with me so we can have a chat or any questions that you might have. And even download the ultimate guide to setting up a PMO. It's a 12-page PDF guide. Over 50,000 people have downloaded it, and they're using it to either, get their PMO set up or educating their executive leaders on it. So that's where you can find me.
That's great. Thank you. Well, for those listening, please check the show notes to get links to the websites for my guests. Guys, thank you for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Well, special thanks to Peter and to Bill and to Hussain for joining for this episode. I certainly enjoyed the discussion. I hope you got value out of it. I would love to hear from you. What are you seeing with PMOs, either at your current organization or perhaps what you've been hearing as you network with other colleagues in the industry? What's working? What's not working? I'd love to hear from you. You can contact me at show@peopleandprojectspodcast.com. If we're not already connected on LinkedIn, send me an invite. Find me there on LinkedIn. Send me an invite. I'd love to connect with you. And then finally, you know what? If you are going to PMI's Global Conference in October, it's going to be right here in my hometown of Chicago. Please stop by. On Saturday afternoon, I'm delivering a session on decision making. Stop on by. I'd love to meet you. Well, thank you for joining me for this video episode of the People and Projects podcast. Have yourself a great week.
Okay, for me, it's 7 a.m., so I'm good. I got a whole work day ahead of me.
I like that picture in the background. Is that John McEnroe?
It is. It's a stand-up. He is my hero. And that's a signed wooden racket in a frame. Those are British stamps of McEnroe. When I was over in England, I got stamps from him.
Bill, that's awesome.
Yeah, he is my hero. I love him.
It looks like he's got a halo over his head. And
it's a tennis racket.
I was going to say, but if you sit just right, it looks like there's a halo on top of you.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. No, it was a one-time stand-up cutout that I got from a tennis store, and I said, "Oh, I have to buy that."
Oh, man.
So yeah, it's cool. You can't get that, of course, anymore.
Not going to happen.
No.
All right, Shane, made it.
Awesome.
Finally.
Yeah.
How are we doing?
Oh, good, man. We got your beautiful face in there. We got Bill Dow here, and we're trying to get Peter's mic and camera to work. So, Bill, you're able to hear us okay, right?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
You're saying you're able to hear us okay?
Yep, I can hear you fine.
Yeah. It's like one kicking avatar you got there, man. Hussain, did you actually turn your camera off, or does it do that when you don't talk?
Yeah, so I think when I switch between apps, it looks like it might be changing it.
Are you watching Netflix while we're starting out?
I wouldn't be touching anything.
No, not. I was just going through your questions again.
Just checking, man. Do you have one other browser that you could try, just in case it's let's just try it, just in case it's a browser issue. Yeah.
Cool. Wow. Look at that.
I got him.
That's it, yeah?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Coming up.
There you go.
Awesome.
Wow.
Technology is a thing, isn't it?
Yeah. So apparently Microsoft doesn't work. Wow.
Yeah.
Who'd have thought?
Yeah. Who would have thought? What went out for Bill and I? We tried rebooting. We tried so it's just a perfect day. Hey, thanks for your patience there, Peter.
No problem. No problem.
Diligence pays off. I think I learned that from the lazy project manager somewhere along the lines.
Excellent.
Yeah. All right. So any questions before we start up, guys?
No.
Nope,
Right.
I'm good.
Let's do it.
All right. All right.
Well, it's working. Let's go.
Make the most of it.
All right. Let's do it. That is a wrap, man. You guys are rock stars. Way to go. And boy, Bill was in a hurry to get off. Doggone it. Check that out, man. He's got
He's got a tennis match.
Well, it is officially almost 8:00 in the morning there. Hey, you guys played along really nicely. Way to go. Nice job. Way to go. So
It's fun. It's fun.
yeah.
Sandy, and it was Bill left, but it's truly been an honor to be with PMO stalwarts like Peter and Bill here, and I really appreciate that. So thanks, guys.
Well, actually, Hussain, this whole thing started because of an idea you had on LinkedIn back and forth. And Peter, you've been a contributor to at least a couple episodes before. And so you are, Peter, one of the most generous guys I know in this industry with your knowledge, not only prolific, but generous. So thank you for that.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Okay.
All right. Have a great one. See you guys.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Yep. Cheers.